or faith related to death. The Bible teaches that to follow a God or a religious system, a human philosophy, or whatever that has, number one, no explanation for the existence of death in the human condition, and then number two, has no answer, then provides no victory over that death, would be a complete waste of time and a waste of faith, because death is the enemy of all mankind. And we know it. We know death even before we come to know God. We know there is something wrong about this thing in the human condition. We fear it. We realize that this is foreign to what life should be. And why would I follow a God who has no answer for the origin of one of the great enemies of mankind? That would not be a God worth following or a philosophy worth following. If there is no explanation for death and no victory over death, as Paul said, then let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, if that's the case. And if death is going to be the one that has the final say related to our lives. And the Bible tells us that we must never, ever, ever, ever trust in any so-called Savior or God, lowercase or uppercase G, philosophy, or any person, place, or thing concerning our eternity who cannot supply us with an explanation for the existence of death in the human condition. To begin with, have you ever wondered why we die as human beings? Not just thinking about the fact that people do die, or even wondering what happens to people after they die, but to ask the question, why does it exist at all? And there is nothing in the entirety of the world that provides so satisfactory an explanation, an answer to that question, than the first three chapters of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. And the Bible teaches that death reveals each of us to be a descendant of that fallen Adam and Eve in that ancient Garden of Eden. And I think a person can legitimately ask or legitimately wonder, how do I know that the Garden of Eden is real? That the fall of Adam and Eve was real? I view it as mythology. I view it as a fable. That is something that, certain people believe. How do I know that the Bible's record of the sin and the fall of man is true? What proof is there that I am a descendant of Adam, that I am fallen, as the Bible teaches? And the Bible's answer to that outstanding question is found in the existence of death, the fact of death in the human condition. Paul wrote in that same chapter of 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and he answers that question related to the origin of death and my tie to death in its introduction in that Garden of Eden in 4 words. He said, "In Adam all die, and death reveals every single one of us to be a descendant of that ancient Adam." Now, the Bible further teaches that we must never, ever, 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 ever trust in any so-called Savior or God or guru or person or philosophy or place or thing with our eternity who has not conquered death and who has not demonstrated an absolute authority over this enemy of man called death. One day the scribes and the Pharisees, they were among the Jewish religious leaders of Jesus' day, they came up to him and they asked him for a request. And they asked him for a sign, and they said, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." A sign to prove what? A sign to prove his claim to be Messiah, to be the Son of God and God the Son. They didn't need any more signs. The land of Israel, from the north to the south, to the east to the west, was full of signs that testified to him being exactly who he said he was. You had the blind seeing, the lame were walking, the lepers were cleansed, the deaf were hearing, the dead had been raised from the dead, the poor having the gospel preached to them, just as the Old Testament said that the Messiah would do. But Jesus, in his grace, conceded to give them one more sign. And here's how he prefaced it to them. He said, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign will be given to it except the," singular, "the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." What sign did he give them? The sign of his death, burial, and his resurrection. That as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of that great fish, so too Jesus said, "I will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." And the idea is 3 days and 3 nights only, speaking of his resurrection. And what was he communicating? Jesus was communicating, among many things, don't trust in any salvation, any Savior, any Messiah that has not conquered death. And there's no shortage of people who can wax philosophical about anything and everything in life, including how life is to be lived, and including about death, what happens at the moment of death, what happens after death. But Jesus says, if they have not conquered death, they are not to be trusted. And Jesus alone spoke authoritatively about life and death, but then proceeded to demonstrate his authority over death through his resurrection. And he stands alone in human history in that regard. And so as David takes here and he looks at